Looks like we're on. I'm going to give a second for the stream to go up on YouTube or something. There it is live. So here I am with my buddy Ameer. We're going to talk a little bit about the election results and what does it mean for the next year? What does it mean for the economy? What's likely to happen over the next couple of months, as obviously Biden is going to get declared the winner, and then Trump is going to say that it's a fraud, and there's going to be some evidence of some fraud, and then they're going to take it to court and all this stuff. So I'm just going to let me tweet this out, and that'll be the topic of our conversation. You can feel free to start going while I tweet this, Amir. Maybe introduce yourself for anybody that's like on my channel here that's not sure who you are.
Where's this being broadcast? Everywhere?
Yeah, Facebook, just like my Facebook friends, my Facebook page for the podcast, YouTube, Twitter, stuff like that.
I'm a troublemaker. That's it. A rogue Ronin troublemaker that likes to talk shit. There you go.
Rogue Ronin.
But the election's interesting. I'm not too interested about the election. I'm interested in the zeitgeist of the general populace and how easily people are swayed and manipulated into thinking that their candidate cares about them and how a single individual human being somehow will make their lives better. It's fascinating to actually witness the memetics and the psychological narrative, the mind virus, I like to call, on how the group thinking creates many different in-groups and tribes. And it's almost like, well, Rene Girard talks about this, Jung talks about this, and basically you can predict exactly human behavior. We're predictable. We're not really rational. You can predict how people will behave. There's that saying, a single person is intelligent, a group of people are idiotic. And when you have a whole group of people that don't think for themselves, the narrative speaks for themselves, right? So it's like when I'm sitting down talking with, say, 2-3 people, I'm not speaking to those people. I'm speaking to the ideology of those individuals. They don't have any individual thought. Their thinking is regurgitating what they hear on social media and what their so-called leaders tell them. So it's fascinating to see this play out because it's played out throughout history. Through Greek, through the Romans, through the Persians, is nothing new.
Well, let me ask you. Let me cut
recency bias. It's just a fact because it's so new and people. Yeah,
I'm totally with you, man. And I was like wondering what you were thinking about this thought that I had, because I was thinking before this was happening that Trump was a shoo-in. A lot of people that are like independent thinkers and independent media sources, we're all thinking that, Trump was just going to have it for sure. And then COVID came along, and a lot of us then thought, well, Trump's response to COVID is going to be his downfall. Doesn't matter who the nominee is on the other side. And it looks like that's partly what's causing Trump to lose this one. But the big narrative was that so many people didn't vote last time because the media colluded with the DNC, and they pushed this narrative that there was no chance that Trump was going to win. Hillary was going to take it. Trump was going to nuke every country as soon as he got the presidency and all that stuff. So everybody was like, just like this time with the polls were all way wrong. Same thing has happened last time. So it's the memetics and the tribalism and everything you were talking about. It played out again, and it's been playing out, and it's been getting worse, I feel, in the last 4 years. But isn't it a good thing that Trump, if Trump loses, right, and if Biden is elected president, even there was a very strong anti-Trump, no matter who else but Trump, movement, and a lot of people just didn't like Biden, but they voted for him anyways. So do you think that it's a good thing that Trump is out, even if all the stuff that they were saying about him was probably not true, like Russiagate was all overblown and a hoax and all that stuff. If the media, the media focused on all these things that were nonsense stories, but then they won't even touch the stories that are very similar about the politicians on the left, the energy around everybody has been so negative over the last couple of years that do you think that maybe with Trump gone, the energy will shift and it won't be so divisive and negative online anymore? Or do you think it's just going to get worse?
The very nature of politics is you have to have an enemy. That's the very nature of the Machiavellian model they've created. So no matter what, you have to paint an enemy and do whatever you can to dehumanize a group of people. Because when you dehumanize a group of people, you don't have any empathy or emotional connection towards them. This is classical playbook. It's been going on for centuries. And so, and it's going to get worse and worse. The masters of our times are the AI engineers who control social media, who put certain ads and content in front of you to manipulate your thoughts, subconsciously speaking. You don't even have to physically be clicking an ad or physically be clicking an article to read it. The very notion of seeing certain patterns of words, the very notions of seeing certain colors, and these patterns get ingrained in you. We as human beings, we recognize everything in patterns. This is how babies learn. This is how grand chess masters are the best at what they do. They don't play by one move at a time. They play by pattern blocks. They memorize all these different patterns that become very second nature towards them. And so it's no matter what, I think if you look at history, and The Fourth Turning is a great book for this, and no matter what, when you have a centralized entity like a nation state, which is brand new experiment, very, very brand new experiment, eventually that centralized power erodes on itself. And so the time span, who knows, T plus 100 years, T plus 150 years, or 250 years, who knows? But the so-called American experiment of whatever it is or what it was trying to be, I think it's unraveling. And my thesis for the longest period of time is we are eventually going to slowly, but it's going to be a lot of turmoil. We are going to slowly be moving away from these centralized nation states, but it's not going to be a very, let's say, smooth transition.
Well, that's a long time away, though, right? That's like you're talking a long time for that to happen.
People have a misconception.
I want to know what the price of Bitcoin is going to be next year. That's what I'm concerned about.
If your time preference is 10 years, then it really doesn't matter.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Whether it's Trump or Biden, it doesn't matter for the price of something like Bitcoin. Like both of them are going to print money.
People talk about the stock market. It's like, oh, if Trump's in power, stock market's going to rip, or if Biden's in power, stock market's going to dump. It's not the case. The Fed's in power. As long as the Fed remains a Fed, the United States government is at the mercy of the Fed.
It's true, but also like this round of stimulus was the quickest action that they've taken yet, and it was led by Trump. Like Trump got that stimulus passed really quickly and printed more money than any president has ever printed in history at one time at a record-breaking pace, like really quickly. And it was actually the Democrats that were like holding up the stimulus and stuff, because I don't know if it was because maybe they just wanted the political clout themselves. Like Trump went more socialist than the Democrats when the COVID crash hit. And I think it's maybe because he understands markets more, but all the value that they propped up, it doesn't help the average person on the street. It just keeps the pump going. It keeps the bubble going. All this phantom value that's in the stock market. The average American didn't get the benefit of all that money that was printed. It was like $18,000 per person went to corporations when, like, what was it, $1,500 went to the average American. So yeah, it's good for the stock market, but most people don't have stocks.
Okay, let's go back 4 years. You had Obama, then who was before Obama? Bush, and then what was it, Clinton? Mm-hmm. Regardless of who's in power, two things happen with the government. Number one, more taxes are imposed on regular working class citizens. First unforeseen tax regular people really don't know about is inflation, right? This is the worst hidden, or shouldn't be hidden, but it's the worst form of tax that people have.
Yeah, and anybody who saves money, their money value is getting destroyed by these presidents printing money.
Yeah.
And the Federal Reserve, like you said.
you have inflation, property tax. Even out here in Ontario, I call this as soon as COVID hit. I'm like, the first thing that's going to happen is property tax value is going to go up. That's because that's the easiest, fastest way for governments to start clawing back some type of tax revenue is through property tax. And historically, this has been accurate. So if you look at any countries around the world, property tax is the first thing they go after. And so regardless of who's power or who goes into power, whether it's Republicans or Democrats, the government grows. So they hire more bureaucrats, the actual employees of the government grow, and taxation grows. Now the taxation cuts, you think big multi-corporations that have billions of dollars in lobbyists around the world, like for them, they have the resources and means to be anywhere in the world. They're in Ireland for 1% corporate tax. They have IP licensing deals, or they switch different licenses and IPs from country to country. Like it really doesn't matter of what the government puts into play. Like they are the government. The lobbyists are the government. That what screwed up Washington, and not just Washington, Canada's exact same thing, is the fact that the lobbyists were allowed to pretty much do whatever they want. Like the lobbyists have completely manipulated and Frankensteined whatever last resemblance of a free market that we have. Like there is no more free market. It's impossible to compete. Like Amazon.
Yeah, man,
okay,
it's crazy.
It's a joke, man. It's literally socialism.
And
for
that's
the
going
elites.
back, and it's going back to the status quo of. I heard Eric Weinstein talk about lobbyists and how Trump stopped seeing lobbyists all during his presidency, and that was actually positive because the lobbyists did take over, and Trump just stopped taking meetings with them. But then he said that it was actually not a good thing because Trump's closest circle became the lobbyists. Like they started getting paid all these deals. Maybe it was not Eric Weinstein, I don't remember, but it was somebody on a Joe Rogan podcast. They were talking about how the lobbyists started just going after like his closest circle, and then lobbyists eventually will always come into it. But with the Joe Biden presidency, that's just going to go back to business as normal, the status quo, the normal establishment. Washington politics is all about lobbyists and pork budgets and all this stuff. So they're going to spend money. Like President Trump, President Biden, they're both going to spend a ton of money. They're going to erode the value of the dollar by continuing to spend more and more and more money, increasing the national debt of the United States. But it seems like if Biden really does become president, which it kind of looks like that's going to happen, then it's not going to be too drastic because the Republicans are going to have more power. They're going to have more power in the Senate, or was it the House? One of them. They took one of them.
I'm pretty sure it's the House.
So they'll be able to have like. Go ahead.
The president can only do so much, right? He has veto powers for some amendments that he can do, but at the end of the day, it's the House that controls it. It has to bypass the House. The House has to vote it in.
Right. So the Democrats are going to have the presidency, but the Republicans are going to have the House, and then that will create kind of the same sort of stalemate situation that Trump was in for the first couple of years of his presidency, where he couldn't really get anything done except by executive order because they didn't want to do any of the proposals he was trying to push forward, like building the wall and ending Obamacare and all these things, these big projects he wanted to do. Couldn't get any of it done. Barely got the Supreme Court justice passed just recently. So it will seem like not much is going to change. They're just going to keep printing money, which they're going to keep trying to inflate the value of the stock market. They're going to keep trying to like keep the illusion going. It just almost feels to me, man, like there's going to be less divisiveness because there won't be a big agitator. Like Trump is really an agitator, whether you're on his side or not.
Listen, there's always going to be an scapegoat. There has to be.
But you remember in 2012 when like the Tea Party movement heated up, right? And they swept Congress or whatever, Senate. They got a bunch of these freedom, sort of pro-freedom, libertarian almost candidates in, and they were just doing massive rallies all over the place. That kind of died off after a couple of years. It felt like it anyways. I mean, it started with the Ron Paul movement in 2008, 2012, but then became the Tea Party movement. They did get a lot done, but then it didn't really seem like so I'm thinking all this anger and divisiveness that has bubbled up over the last few years because of the division between the social media on the left, the social media on the right, the mainstream news sources on the left and the right. With no Trump, I almost feel hopeful. Like, I feel like when you see how impactful independent media sources have become, like Joe Rogan, getting more viewers and more listeners than like Fox News and CNN, that's amazing. I love seeing stuff like that. Independent media is growing massively, and I think it's because people are sick of this hard left, hard right propaganda. So without this big agitator or this big enemy like Trump on the left or whoever on the right, when things go back to some kind of normal status quo, it almost feels like it'll be better because the independent media rose up out of this divisiveness, and they're going to have more power and more voice than ever before. And what is the Fox News and the CNNs and MSNBCs? What are they going to do? They'll have no Trump news anymore, so they're going to just slowly lose viewership and revenue because nobody's going to watch them anymore. Trump was their bread and butter for 4 years.
Or Trump was the best for their business.
Yeah, really, it was. And all these like clickbait articles and all this Russiagate stuff. Like, I watch Jimmy Dore. I love Jimmy Dore. His podcast is amazing, or his show, his YouTube show is amazing. He covers things from a progressive socialist viewpoint. Like, he's a socialist, he's a progressive, but he hates the collusion and the fraud and all that stuff. And he's
is he a true socialist? Like forced co-ops?
No, he's for workers and healthcare and, you know, higher taxes on the rich. Like,
I never understand that argument, because what's stopping you and I from right now making a co-op?
Well, the argument on that side is that there's a lot of people that are gonna be left under the safety net that others don't have the opportunity to create that co-op, and then they'll just get left out. Like, the American healthcare system is totally screwed up right now. But I don't think that's because of capitalism versus socialism. I think it's because they don't have enough regulations and they have too many corporatist rules that favor the healthcare companies.
It's too much regulation. The regulations in favor of the healthcare companies with the insurance companies.
Yeah, it allows a non-competition to happen so that they can mark up prices of all their treatments and everything. They should regulate prices, or they should just totally open it up. Like, they shouldn't.
They should have a two-tier system. I keep on telling this for Canada. Like, Canada is
Australia.
Great. Australia has it. Yeah, I think France has a good model for it too. It's the best model for both worlds. It's like, okay, you have the quote unquote socialized healthcare, which our taxes goes towards paying the support for the citizens of that nation. But you're not getting premium healthcare. You're going to have long waiting lines. You're not going to have the best type of doctors, because at the end of the day, you know, my wife's a doctor. So like, at the end of the day, you go into debt $300,000-$400,000, and you have the option of going to a private hospital or a private clinic, and they pay you $400,000 or $500,000 salary versus getting paid $100,000 salary at a hospital. Which one you're going to choose?
Mm-hmm. The situation is pretty dire in Cape Breton, where I'm from right now. It's they've got ranked the worst healthcare situation in Canada right now, and like my family doctor for my whole family, my grandparents, my mom, my dad, like my siblings, they all had this one doctor, Dr. Gracie, and he was 75 years old or something, and he was still practicing because there's a shortage of family doctors in Cape Breton.
Because the OHIB model is broken because of revolving door. So yeah, you have a time frame of how many patients you have to see under the insurance policy of OHIB. And so OHIB only pays you out for certain types of codes. So you have to be categorized as a certain ailment or disease or whatever to be classified in the insurance policy for OHIB. So then you can figure out, I'm only open as a clinic for 8 hours a day. That means I have to see X amount of patients in 8 hours a day to make my overhead for that.
Yeah, you just got to like have a treadmill of patients coming through. And plus, what makes it even worse, my wife has an autoimmune disorder, and we've experienced this problem with the medical system here, where if you have a long-term illness, you actually, as a doctor, get paid less to see that patient. So you're incentivized to get that person out of your office because they're going to keep coming back because they have a long-term illness. So we had problems with my wife and my doctor, thankfully, is just like, man to man was talking to me, and I was advising him on his Bitcoin and stuff like that. We were just kind of chatting. We're both gamers. Like we bonded over that, and he was just telling me straight up how it is. Like this, he said, I'm not going to give you guys worse care, but this is how it is. Like we're actually incentivized to get someone who has a long-term illness out of the office as quick as possible because we get paid less, and we have to see our minimums. We have to get money coming in. But in Cape Breton, it's even worse because with the clinic there, they can't keep any doctors because the CRA, like the tax authorities, are constantly on them, and they're like making it's like the paperwork and the burden of running a clinic is so high that all these doctors end up just leaving and going working for the hospital. So right now there's a huge waiting list of people who don't have family doctors in Cape Breton, and like my grandparents now in their 80s are stuck at home. My grandfather got shingles recently, and he's like, we had nothing we could do except go to the hospital for 8 hours and wait. And it's like they're in their 80s. They don't want to be doing that. They don't have a family doctor. And there's just a big, huge, long waiting list. If there was a 2-tiered healthcare system, I could just pay the extra like $1,000 or something and get my grandfather to have like a private system where he could go get his shingles checked out without having to wait 12 hours at a potentially COVID infested hospital. It's crazy. We should have a 2-tier healthcare system, and the United States should have a different healthcare system. There's no doubt about that.
Well, United States can roll it out in different way. What they have that Canada doesn't have. Technically, we're still more or less a colony of the British Empire. We have one piece of land that's under the quote unquote, even if you go to court, you see Queen, it's under the Queen. It's not under the Canada. It's not under the Prime Minister. It's still under the Queen. We don't have sovereign states. And yes, in the United States, slowly that sovereignty of a state as a republic has eroded. But technically speaking, within the Constitution, that law still applies. And above all, even if that law technically is blurred, each state has its own national guards, and each state has a right to defend itself and has a means for protection. And so, technically speaking, actually, we'll get back to Canada. Technically speaking, United States, a certain state, let's say Texas, for example, if they decide to run an experiment of a 2-tier system, they technically could do it.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's actually a disincentive, I think, for the United States or the establishment anyway, the establishment political systems to push for that, because the amount of lobbying that goes into the private healthcare system, the pharmaceutical companies, and to have the corporatist sort of insider deals and contracts with the government, it's huge. I think, like, isn't healthcare in like $1 trillion industry now?
Well, yeah. The next problem though is like, where does the money come from that? You're not going to raise taxes on regular. You can raise taxes on regular people, especially now with COVID. $3.6 trillion
on healthcare last year. So it's a multi-trillion-dollar industry. But like in terms of the costs, so like I'm not paying that much more taxes than our friends in the United States. We get, like, my wife, I tweeted this earlier this week. I was just really disappointed by.
Yeah, but you got to look at it this way. The taxes are quote unquote accounted for. Right. So let's say, okay, it's different in the United States because state by state they have very varying different taxes, but Canada's kind of, it's blended, almost is the same. Property tax, generally speaking, is the same. Income tax pretty much is the same, unless you're on, Aboriginal land. But for the most part in Canada, I think the household for healthcare on a yearly basis comes to like $2,000, $3,000 in tax, give or take, something like that in Canada. That is allocated. It's within the budget that amount goes towards a healthcare system in Canada. Let's go to the United States. We go state by state, right? This is going to have to be federal, United States. Right now, as of today, the tax is already allocated. There's a budget for X, Y, and Z. Let's say they want to start implementing the socialized healthcare policy. Where does the extra money come from?
Well, so for one, the fact that the Americans have to use name brand pharmaceuticals, and that gives the name brand pharmaceutical companies a monopoly and the ability to mark up the prices of their drugs to ridiculous amounts so that they can claim insurance on it and make $3 trillion. That's obscene, because here we can buy generic brand medicine and save 98% on the cost of drugs. That's just one thing. Like my wife's medication for her CVID immune disorder that she has, it would cost $200,000 a year in the United States. And it does cost, like I follow a couple people on Instagram. I feel so bad for them. They're in America, and like they just sometimes they have to choose between their monthly injection of antibodies or like their house payment or their job. It just sucks. It's terrible. Like people, I think I saw a stat. It was about 100,000 people go bankrupt from medical related expenses in the United States every year. Or is that maybe even a month? It's some obscene amount. It's like people's lives are getting ruined constantly in the United States because of medical bills.
Because this is a corrupt monopoly. Has nothing to do with the
Joe Biden's not going to change that. President Biden's not going to do anything to change that. Actually, Trump was talking about in the debate, I don't know if it's true or not, that he passed through some legislation or has got an executive order in place or something where he's going to authorize generic medication for the first time. So it'll bring down drug costs for people. That's a huge thing.
I wonder if a lot of Americans go down to Mexico to get their medication.
Maybe their drugs, some psilocybin, some what's that?
No. Oh, which one? Ayahuasca?
Ayahuasca, yeah.
No, I'm sorry, like pharmaceutical. Like everybody,
maybe
like Mexico is pretty much free for all. You can buy whatever you want.
And there was that movie Sicko that Michael Moore did, where he documented people coming up to Canada to get their medical bill or their see a doctor and stuff like that. Or going
it's still expensive.
Cuba.
If you don't have OHIP over here, it's still costly, man.
Yeah. If you don't have your card, but it's not nearly as bad as it is in the States. Like $200,000 for that medicine. It would probably cost us here like maybe $20,000 to pay for it ourselves, but it's $200 because they mark everything up because they can just claim it from the insurance companies.
Yeah.
It's insane. So anyways, that's what Jimmy Dore is like. That's the type of YouTuber, comedian, political commentary guy he is. He's not like, he's worth watching. The YouTube shows.
I know Jimmy. I just don't follow his stuff.
I love him because he doesn't hold back anything from the left or the right. And I don't quite agree with him on all of his policies. Obviously, I don't agree with him on like his economic stuff, and I don't think he really understands what's going to happen if you try to do, the Green New Deal or something like that, and you really do try to, execute these things that are going to wreck the stock market. I mean, it's a double-edged sword because the stock market should get wrecked, but it would send the world into like a worldwide depression if socialist policies actually do start getting implemented and they start regulating or cutting down regulations in some areas. I mean, it's a delicate thing right now, and it should come down, but the situation with the election is kind of hopeful in a way that it doesn't seem like there's anything going to be too extreme happening either way, whether Trump takes the states to court and wins, and then the election gets ruled in his favor, or whether he concedes and Biden takes over with a peaceful power transfer. It doesn't. I don't know. What's your thoughts on it? Do you think that anything is going to change much in terms of the economy or dollar printing, or like what do you think there?
Chomsky said it the best. The party's always in power. People have a illusionary viewpoint that there's a difference between the left and the right. The left is a left when it benefits the left. The right is a right when it benefits the right. These policies are interchangeable. They switch them back and forth. Candidates go from different party to different party. So for me, I always ask a simple question, regardless of who's in power, what party's in power, who controls Senate, yada, yada, yada. The regular average working person in the bell curve, like 90% of the population, no matter what, we are plebs. We get nothing. We don't benefit. We're not part of the inner circle. We're not part of the nepotistic society that they run. We're not part of this lobbyist that we get upside. No matter what, we do get more taxes. No matter what, more rights are taken away from us. No matter what, there's more privacy, or I would say lack of privacy, taken away from us. So like, we don't win. Like, you just look at history. You look at every single year, what happens? Less privacy for us, less rights for us, less freedom for us, more taxes for us, and just keeps on going, regardless of who's in power. And
and the wool has definitely been pulled over everybody's eyes. Like the distraction from the real issues of fighting against surveillance and pro privacy, like hard money, sound money, like all of that stuff.
like, for
Personal
example,
liberty, like that's all
in
under attack, and no one's watching what they're
like
watching.
these no knock warrants, like they passed. I forget who was it that passed it. Was it fuck? I forget who passed that law.
Probably
But no,
Biden
maybe
in
I
the
don't know who did
90s.
it. But it's basically without a warrant, they can enter your house and just take whatever they want under the guise of illicit activities, and it's the burden is on you to show them that you're not guilty. So therefore, you have to foot the bill for the legal costs and the lawyers. Think about that. We, as whatever you can call it, the legal establishment, the quote unquote legal establishment, police force, etc., all that stuff, they can come to your house and say, "Well, Brad, we have assumptions that you might be, a drug cartel." And we're going to take all these computers and we're going to take your car, we're going to take your house, we're going to take your bank account. We don't know. We're not going through court system. We can hold that. We just don't know if you're guilty or not. But it's the burden's on you to prove your innocence.
That's crazy. Yeah, that's nuts. That's all infuriating, that stuff. But yeah, it doesn't seem like Biden's gonna do anything different there. It's like I was disappointed with Trump. A lot of things that he was saying, like he was gonna change, but then he
Are you really
became.
disappointed? Are people like I find it
Well, I
naive?
was I was actually hopeful in 2016 that Trump was going to drain the swamp and that he was going to actually become, that he wasn't an establishment politician. He was going to stop spending.
Okay,
I was hopeful,
okay.
but quickly, obviously, that became, he's spending more money on the war and spending more money on weapons. He's spending more money on, he cut a few things, but he spent more money on the military than any other president. Like the $1 trillion deficit is like a new thing under Trump. He was on track to spend more than even Obama, and Obama spent more money than any other president in history. So he wasn't keeping
Listen,
really
the
his
only
promises.
way that we can survive this is city states. That's the only way I see.
What
I'm
is this?
serious.
What is this? Civilization 6? We have to get in.
No, we have city states now. Even Canada has city states. People forget it. Aboriginal land is city state legally. They have their own constitution, their own police force, their own taxation policy. They're a sovereign land apart from Canadian sovereign land. United States a little bit different because they have their own states and they have more
I don't
legal.
think enough people really care though about it for that to work. People like the convenience of not having to deal with garbage collection. People are gonna and policing and stuff. I don't think that's gonna like what's the
What
I
do you
don't
mean? There's still going to be police.
yeah, I know. I just thinking like that's kind of
The-
altruistic, but like
It's not
not likely to
altruistic.
happen.
The
It would
my
be
version of
nice if
no.
people don't even care about their online surveillance, like they'll gladly give up their rights and not care about somebody like Snowden or Julian Assange because CNBC or CNN told them that they hacked Hillary's emails and now they're an enemy of the United States because they gave the election to Donald Trump or some BS like that when they're not even looking at the facts of how they are fighting for privacy and fighting for everybody's rights.
People will eventually care when the boot's so far up their ass and the water's boiling when they have no choice but to care, and that will happen. I find it very naive, especially in Canada because we're much more calm and chill. That people think stuff can happen here. I'm like, you do forget in World War II, we imprisoned born Japanese. And people have a very short-term memory. You do realize, do you understand what we did to the Aborigines here with our residential schools? Do you understand, like, not too long ago, from 1940s, what we've done to our own citizens in Canada? Don't be so stupid and
Or
fucking
even
naive.
like what we're kind of still doing even now to still some like people that not in Canada so much, but in the US, like the drug war is still raging. There's still like prison population is
Don't even get me
insane in the
started
United
for that,
States.
man. That is fucked. That's
That's not
beyond.
going to change, right? Like what I was thinking that like because Joe Biden was one of the people that helped pass the crime bill in the 90s and was supported Clinton and like
Clinton's 3-strike rule. Holy
yeah, the
fuck.
3 strike rule, like they helped usher in the militarization of the police and three strikes you're out and all these like drug war policies that what is that word? Disproportionately affected minorities and black men in inner cities. And now 50 years or 60 years later or whatever, he's still a politician, and I don't think he's changed that much. So with his vice president, Kamala Harris, she was also doing some pretty shady stuff when she was DA of California. Was she district attorney, or what was she in California?
I forget. She jailed more black people than anybody else, or some shit like that.
Yeah, there was a lot of people that were like black men and minorities that were prosecuted by her for minor nonviolent drug crimes, and she had the chance.
Yeah, that's right. Nonviolent drug. That's exactly what
she was the DA for California, and she had like civil rights groups and everything were after her. So you got like her, who has a terrible reputation already for not standing up for people of color and ending these corrupt, insane drug laws and nonviolent criminals, like ruining their lives, ruining families' lives. Plus, you got act pretty much with the other Bill Clinton and the Democrats in the 90s. It does not seem okay. Let's not be too negative though, because there was a really good trend of marijuana legalization and even hard drug decriminalization in some places. Wasn't it Oregon who decriminalized most hard drugs? And there was a few states that legalized psilocybin, I think it was.
Well, California in a nutshell is not legally decriminalized but not enforced.
That's great. Like we're moving forward. That's great. Like it's good to see that, but we need to see. It just sucks to see all these people in jail for nonviolent crimes, and I hope Trump pardons a lot of people. Like if he gets pushed out, like
he should pardon Snowden right away.
Pardon like 90% of the people in the for-profit prison system,
and get Ross out of jail.
Yeah, Ross Ulbricht too. Get him out of jail. I don't know. Can he pardon Julian Assange? Because Julian Assange isn't an American.
Wait, he's an American or no?
He's not.
No, he's not. Oh, then he can't. But he can give him asylum.
Okay. Yeah, so that would be awesome. It would be really nice if Trump did that. If he's going to get...
countries give asylum to most random people. Like you look at history, for example, in Africa, Uganda, it was Idi Amin. Idi Amin was a dictator, killed millions of people. And Saudi Arabia gave him asylum, and he died a rich man in Saudi Arabia, but he was one of the biggest sociopaths possible.
Crazy. So I guess it's not bad, it's not good, it's just more status quo. I'm actually a little bit leaning more towards the hopeful side of things, because I think when you look at it from a net perspective of just energy, there was more negative energy the last 4 years because of Trump. And I'm not saying Trump did these things, like colluded with Putin and he was a agent of Russia and all this stuff, but the energy was there, and it was fixation from social media. And like you said, like the AI basically like sucked everybody down the rabbit hole, the algorithms, and these companies are making record profits, but at the same time, it drove the people to seek out unbiased information, and that
that Trump is a Manchurian candidate, that this is all psyops, and he's controlled opposition, and they put him in place over there as an scapegoat to create.
What's that? What's that theory?
I don't know. I'm just making it up on the fly. It makes sense to me.
Like, give me something. I want to hear this. So this is a Manchurian candidate. All right. Well, there is something going around now about how people are saying that Trump is playing 5D chess, and he he was working with the DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, to bait the Democrats into doing fraudulent mail-in ballot rigging. So with this sort of like blockchain technology, ballot printing or something like that, and it was a big sting operation. I think that's all BS, but
I think we find out tonight or tomorrow. I think Nevada is the last state for counting, and I think Georgia or something said there has to do a recount. I don't know. I'm not really keeping up to date with it, just whatever. But let's say Biden does win the electoral college and gets the seats that he needs to get. Knowing Trump, I definitely see him appealing that and taking that to the highest level possible for whether it's last time this happened with Bush and Gore, I believe.
Yeah, I remember that. It was like a month or something. It took
a while for the final results to come in from.
I remember I was watching Bill Maher every night. I'd watch Bill Maher talk about it. I was 19, 20, whatever it was at the time, and my friends and I would just sit down in front of the TV and watch Bill Maher. It's always the comedians that seem to
but watch this. People talk about like the progressive party of Biden and Kamala. Biden's either going to die if he's president, or he's going to have to step aside because that guy's mentally ill. Not from a negative perspective, just too old. He's senile, man. The guy can speak English and can't even remember anything. And the energy for you to be commander in chief of the world's most powerful military. So he's going to whether voluntarily step aside or be physically forced to step aside because he can't physically handle the stress of being president. Maybe Kamala Harris becomes the first female president. Who knows? I don't know. But mark my words, they're going to go to war. These guys they're going to invade Iran. The war machine's going to continue. It's no difference. Like this whole idea of being progressive, this is like the most classic Machiavellian. You can go read the book. If you guys haven't read it, go read Prince, Machiavellian. Fantastic book. Details a lot. It's all Occam's razor. It's like very common sense. They'll say whatever they need to say to be voted in power. Once in power, they have power. Fuck off. It's business as usual.
Obama took the U.S. from 2 wars to 7 wars in his 8 years.
They killed more people with drones than any other president.
Yeah, but I mean, I used to say that too, but then I heard a good argument that, like, the technology for drones came up in his era, so it was just not really his initiative. It was more so just a situation he found himself in, just like how the 2008 or the 2008 real estate bubble collapsed the economy, and he had to print so much money. Well, somebody had to do something, and they were kicking the can down the road. So, but regardless, Obama didn't stop war. He increased the amount of theaters of war, and Trump didn't stop them either. Trump kind of made some concessions here and there, but maybe he took some troops out of Afghanistan. Maybe he tried to get out of Syria and let the Middle East.
The military industrial complex runs everything. That's it.
Trump was no better because he sold billions and billions of dollars of weapons to Saudi Arabia, who committed genocide in Yemen. So,
but from a geopolitical standpoint, you can see why he did that, though.
I mean, it all goes back for me to like Ron Paul's policies of non-interventionism, and why should you take tax money from the citizens to go kill people overseas? Like we're not meant. That's not what our country in Canada or the United States is supposed to be doing. We're not supposed to be just going over fighting wars over oil and lithium and resources and stealing tax money from people to go do that. It's not constitutional. And there was no votes. Like they didn't vote. Mm-hmm. Congress needs to declare war, and they haven't declared war since World War II or something like that. When was the last time Congress? Let's Google that. When was the last time Congress declared war? Been a long time. So Japan, World War II. Yeah. So since then, it's all been illegal wars constitutionally. But yeah, whether it's Biden or Trump or Bush or Obama, I mean, the war is going to continue because it's good for the economy, it's good for jobs. But Trump was like, Obama was a bit of a statesman about it. Obama was just like politically like a good speaker, and he would have a somber tone when he talked about it, and he wouldn't say things straight up. Trump would just be like, well, we need to sell them the weapons because we need the money. Like that's $400 billion. That's a lot of jobs. So like Trump would just be openly honest about selling all these hundreds of billions of dollars of weapons.
It's a little bit more complicated than that, right? So they have to control their position against Iran. Saudi Arabia's biggest threat is
So you tell me why, because I didn't follow that one very much. Why is Saudi Arabia and Yemen at war, and what's the justification for it?
controlling the geographical power struggle for oil production. Simple as that. Same with Iran. And this is why Iran is with Russia. And so Saudi Arabia for the longest time was a powerhouse in the Middle East, right? So they controlled. This is why the United States turned a blind eye for the Wahhabism of Saudi Arabia. Do you know how many people or organizations Saudi Arabia probably funds through their Wahhabi ideology? Like a very twisted form of Islam. And United States, since the Ottoman Empire got kicked out in World War, I think what the final remnants for there was like World War I, they left Saudi Arabia. Britain came in, BP came over there, United States came over there. And ever since that, the United States pretty much I think the United States' biggest military base outside of the United States is in Saudi Arabia. It was in Turkey. As I Saudi Arabia or Turkey. But they have to, the United States, to have the relationship with Saudi Arabia, has to provide them, and it's all part of the deal, provide them the military means. Obviously, they make money from it, but the military means to have the might to go against Iran within the Middle East. It's a power struggle there.
So it says the biggest military base outside of the USA is bigger than New York City. Holy shit.
Is it Saudi Arabia?
I'm trying to find which one it is.
Or was it Turkey?
I think it's Iraq.
Oh. Iraq? No. Really?
No, I know they built like a multi-billion-dollar base.
I don't think so. Iraq. I don't think so. Iraq.
One overseas base is vastly larger than others. It's so large that its footprint is bigger than the entire city of New York. It covers 303 square miles. Is this legit? What am I reading here?
Yeah, Wikipedia. But where is it?
It won't tell me.
Secret location.
Base structure. Yeah, it's on a need-to-know basis. I think I'm reading some clickbait here. Yeah, because it's making me read the entire thing and showing me a bunch of ads. Okay, let's see here. America's largest base. Oh my God. I can't find this. I believe you. There are big bases. There's lots of bases all over the world. And I remember that one that they built in Iraq was pretty a political sort of football that they were throwing around because it was massive and they spent so much money on it. And I think they ended up
here's a classic example, weapons of mass destruction with Bush. Let's go to Iraq. And my wife's family is Kuwaiti and Iraqi, and I have firsthand experience from their family there. So this isn't me reading the internet. This is me talking to people who've born and raised there, right from the horse's mouth. And yes, Saddam Hussein was a CIA agent, highly intelligent operative, was with the United States for the very longest period of time. They had economic treaties with the United States, and his Ba'ath Party was sadistic. Like, don't get me wrong. It's not like I'm not here clapping and celebrating Saddam Hussein, but he was the crazy motherfucker that was so fucking crazy that other crazy motherfuckers were crazy of him because he was the craziest motherfucker. Yeah. Like he was the head of the Hydra there, that even the other so-called clans and quote-unquote warlords would not fuck with him with the Ba'ath Party. So he held this very fine, delicate balance of power in Middle East. And then when you chop off the head of the pyramid there, you create a vacuum. This is exactly what Hillary did with fucking Gaddafi in Libya. Mm-hmm. What Iraq is right now and what Libya is right now, it's fucking, I can't even describe how bad it is.
And it's not, like Libya, there's open slave trading happening right now. That wasn't happening when Gaddafi was in power.
Gaddafi was the same. Gaddafi was, do not fuck with him.
I read afterwards that, like, I was trying to get to the truth of that, because, like, there was that viral thing that went around during the 2016 election when Hillary was laughing about it. Like, we saw he died, and she was cackling about it. And it was just kind of like, okay, is that a joke or is that literally how she is? But regardless, they didn't care about Gaddafi or Libya until they threatened the US dollar and they threatened to create
With
the
the gold.
African petrodollar
Yep.
and create a unified African currency. And
Yep.
afterwards, I had read like people like Nelson Mandela supported Gaddafi. Like
Oh yeah.
people that we respect as thought leaders and stuff supported Gaddafi. So they didn't, I'm sure he wasn't a good guy either, but they missiled his entire family and evaporated his grandchildren. It was disgusting, and she's laughing about it. But I was talking to my wife about this the other day because she was listening to a podcast with somebody who escaped North Korea. Like North Korea is insane right now. And if they really did care about people and suffering and ending suffering and all this stuff that they try to sell war on, they would do something about North Korea. Because that's a crazy situation that's happening in North Korea right now. There's people starving and like
Yeah,
it's
I'll
not
give you a
like
better example. Like but I was at the DMZ zone, so I had a good 3 days to chat with people who escaped North Korea. So I was right.
you were in South Korea?
Yeah, I spent a bunch of time in South Korea, and I spent a while at the DMZ, demilitarized zone there. And I personally spent 2 to 4 days speaking with people that escaped North Korea and got the inside scoop of how it is. And so I'll give you a better example than North Korea. The fucking shit happening in China.
Right.
Like legitimate concentration camps, not like make believe. Like we're talking about full blown concentration camp with Uyghur Muslims. The no human rights policy. They are first, then Iran. They have the most executions. Then Iran has the second execution. These are public executions. But yeah, it's okay.
Well, yeah, the problem with China is that they've got a military and they can't really just go in and take over like they took over Libya or Iraq or whatever. But even the case, like if they were legitimately genuine about their concerns about Saddam Hussein and Gaddafi, they would go in and fix that situation in North Korea, because North Korea can't stop America from going in and overthrowing Kim Jong-un or whatever, in his harems
That's the
and
way
stuff.
to do it. There's too much second order and third order effects when it comes to stuff like that.
I know, but if they really cared about it, they would go do it. So I'm just saying, like, they don't actually care about ending suffering and all this stuff that they try to sell us on and manipulate our emotions and stuff. What they really care about is the resources. Libya was a threat. Gaddafi was threatening to challenge the hegemony of the US dollar and create an African-backed currencies to trade oil in. So they had to take him out. Iran and Iraq have oil reserves, and so they had to go and take the oil and prevent them from getting a monopoly on the oil. And even Syria, like the whole reason why the war in Syria happened was because of the gas, the pipeline that they were trying to build through Syria. Like Russia has the main pipeline that goes through Syria that connects to the rest of Europe, and Russia has the Gazprom bank has the monopoly on the stranglehold of the power in that region. And so Saudi Arabia is trying to build a pipeline through Syria, and that's when everything became, oh, well, we care about the Syrian people now. And then look what happened. They destroyed an entire country fighting over a gas pipeline, telling us it's about like Assad is gassing his people and they care about that. Meanwhile, Kim Jong-un or Il, or what is it, Un now?
I don't know.
He's starving his people and has them all brainwashed, and like they don't care about suffering. And like you said, like the Uyghur Muslims, and there's like any religious organizations that start up in China, they end up sending them to concentration camps because they don't want anything to challenge the CPP.
The power. Yep. That's exactly it.
Like in one way it's kind of fun, kind of funny, or whatever the word is. It's kind of a relief for somebody in China that is just going along, obeying the traffic laws and trying not to get their social credit score dings, taking up the garbage, being polite, respecting the Communist Party, because they don't even have to think about Biden versus Trump. They don't think about politics. Like everybody is just Communist Party. It's just the Communist Party, and it's a brainwashing, but it frees up your mind from all this divisiveness because you don't have an option.
China will collapse.
I'm not saying I like that. It's an interesting observation.
China will collapse like any other nation through its own internal power struggles. It's the Ouroboros, the snake eats its own tail. So when Xi Jinping finally I don't know, probably has to die before, because he's pretty much president for life for the CCP. Same thing with Putin. Though I read something today, Putin has Parkinson's and he's considering I don't fucking know. But you'll see eventually that through the mechanism of the Ouroboros and the different ethnicities within a country, the snake eats its own tail. You can only keep power for so long until your own power system and structure collapse on itself. Like, time is against you.
Yeah, you were telling me before in a podcast that we did a while back that like the Chinese strategy of one of the strategies of war is just to send 1 million people over the border. Like they don't care about people.
That was one of the Cold War strategies in World War. Yeah.
They have overwhelmed the enemy with having to take care of their citizens.
Yeah, and the paper is 1 million people they would send over. Like, here.
Yeah, I mean that's like that just shows you that the way that the Communist Party thinks about the individual is not important.
I find it's hilarious. I want to say hilarious. It's not hilarious. It's actually sad that you have people here, and they're so brainwashed. You have people over here clapping and they are supporting socialism, whatever definition you want to label it as. But yeah, you look at the history of China through Mao. Mao Zedong was a fucking sociopath. You know how many people Mao killed?
Yeah, wasn't it something like 20 million or 100 million or
this conservative, like
through starvation, right?
Yeah, starvation, camps, forced labor.
That was the great. He had this policy of the
Great Leap.
And it was to try to get people out of poverty, but it actually caused a lot of death through starvation, right? The Great Leap Forward, killed 45 million.
Stalin was involved in that economic mix because Russia couldn't produce a lot of food, so China was producing all the grain to feed the Russian army.
That was in what, the 50s or 60s or something?
Something like that.
So, yeah, a lot of people came out of poverty from his policies, but it was one of the biggest mass murders in history. And now you got a lot more people that are like doing better, like hundreds of millions or maybe even 1 billion people are probably doing better now because of his Great Leap Forward. But it's almost unsustainable that they can continue like this.
Or is it because the United States opened up the door with what's his face, the bureaucrat and Kissinger, when Kissinger went to China and they opened up economic policies. And so if China wasn't United States became the buyer's market. The deal was to go there, get cheap slave labor, and pretty much it is slave labor. Different now, but it was slave labor. And United States became the vacuum. They became the buyers of everything being made in China. So if it wasn't the buy-sell marketplace the United States created, China wouldn't be here.
Yeah, so much investment went into China and
huge
the last 30 years or something. It's just insane how they've grown. And we've all heard stories of the ghost cities and all that, where they just had this massive infrastructure rollout that helped employ a lot of people and do these amazing architectural construction epochs, really, that it was like had so many people employed, and then they build these beautiful cities and then no one's in them. Yeah. So it's a big waste just to stimulate the economy. But like, what's going to happen with President Biden with the China situation? Because President Trump was very in your face about how China's manipulating their currency. China's taking advantage of the manufacturing. They're taking advantage of the trade deficit and all that stuff. So
everything you said is true, though. They are taking advantage.
Yeah. So, and he was actually standing up against China. He was the first president to challenge the one China policy. Like, he took a call from the Taiwanese president and acknowledged that they were a legitimate, like, there was a leader of Taiwan.
He also publicly acknowledged that Hong Kong isn't a free country anymore.
Yeah. I mean, one thing about Trump is that, like, if you're following the real situation, he's not this evil racist dictator that the mainstream news has you lead to believe, but he isn't a great president. Like, I'm actually happy to see that I'm not going to have to listen to Trump's voice anymore or see his face. Like, that's going to be great.
You're jumping the gun. Maybe not.
I'd
We'll
be
see what
happy to
happens.
see that. Like, regardless, I'm not really like, I know I'm not brainwashed into thinking that Trump is a racist. Like, you see that Trump just got more votes by Black and Latino and Spanish, or not Black, Latino, and what was the other demographic he did super well with? Women.
No, I
Just in
just know about the
general.
Latinos. Yeah.
Just in general, women. So more Black people voted for Trump this year than any Republican in 60 years. So Trump's obviously not this Nazi, like Hitler racist guy that CNN and New York Times make you have to believe, but he is like a crude, poor speaker, bad example for children, not very statesmanlike, rude. Like, he is all these things, and it is kind of annoying to have to listen to him speak, and I always have to put it on at least 1.5x or 2x whenever I hear him saying to get through it. But if Biden wins, which it looks like he will, I won't be too sad that I'm not going to have to listen to him anymore, and I won't have to listen to the made up, like, ridiculous things that they say about him. Like, I'm not a fan of him, and I'm also, I don't want to be his devil's advocate. I'm such a centrist. I'm like, okay, listen, I have to jump in when people are on Facebook or whatever and say this isn't accurate. This isn't accurate. You're kind of brainwashed here. I do it a lot less now, but I'm glad I won't have to do that because he won't be talked about anymore. It's going to be awful. So in a way, it's good that I'm hoping there's going to be less divisiveness online. And I'd think that just like the Tea Party kind of faded away in their fervent sort of like time in the limelight, I think that the Trump, like the really hardcore Trump supporters, are going to kind of fade away too. And that it's not going to go to like civil war or some kind, it's not going to continue to grow as divisive as it has been. I think, sure, people are going to talk about it, but I feel like it's good for public discourse, even though for privacy, for the economy, for the value of the dollar, it's bad that another establishment politician is in power. But in a way, it's good. So I'm just kind of like neutral on it, but slightly leaning towards positive that Biden looks like he's going to win. But I also don't want to see Biden president, because I know all the crazy shit that they did. You know, they kind of like are not going to change anything. People's lives aren't going to material change under Biden. Not like people are going to get health care, or they're, you know, going to see their taxes go down, or their quality of life's not going to go up. It's still going to be more insiders getting richer, and
listen, the name of the game is status quo. That's it. Keep the machine going.
So it's kind of bad for democracy, but good for public discourse and all of our timelines, I hope. And my energy, like, I'm sure everybody's good to like would be happy to see the energy like dial down a bit, like the politicization of the COVID stuff, like mask, no mask, like it doesn't need to be a political issue. It should just be.
That's a mind virus, man. People get people literally buy. It's a religion, man. People buy
into. Becomes the left versus right when it doesn't have to be.
Yeah, but most people don't pause to really ask themselves a question: am I thinking for myself, or am I just regurgitating information? Like, mask bad, mask good, Trump bad, Trump good.
Yeah.
It's like, what are you? Like, that's all you can say? You can't have a real conversation. You know, the sign of intelligence is holding two different viewpoints in your mind. You can have a proper conversation with somebody. The biggest misconception human beings have is we believe that we communicate with each other when we really don't. We're just screaming at each other our own viewpoints. And this whole notion of like, COVID is fake, COVID is real, masks work, masks don't work, my way or the highway, you're wrong, fuck you, blah blah blah. This leads A, to more in groups, so more tribalism, and B, it doesn't solve anything. There's no solution.
Right. Except for an election, which is going to be hotly contested. I mean, I saw a video today that this guy gave a TED talk, and he was talking about what could happen. And it's like Trump. If it's projected that Trump is going to lose, right, and Biden wins, then Trump should concede. That's the way that they're traditionally do it. Like even Al Gore won the popular vote in the end, but he conceded to Bush. He shouldn't have.
Yeah, yeah.
He ended up winning after he conceded. Like they finished the count and looked like he won. So he conceded when he shouldn't have. But we all know Trump's not going to do that. But here's the thing: like everybody thinks that Trump's going to go to the Supreme Court and they're going to take all legal steps they can to challenge, do recounts, try to catch any voter fraud that was happening and try to get recounts done and challenge the results in certain states. And they're already doing that. They're already taking legal action. And I think it was no, not Wisconsin, it's Philadelphia. One of those states already announced they're going to do a recount.
Georgia.
So I think what's going to likely happen is Trump's not going to like the results. He's going to claim that there was fraud. He's going to challenge it through the courts. It may end up gridlocked for a long time and may go to the Supreme Court. But I think that the way that it went, the Republicans got a lot more seats. The Republicans gained some momentum. They gained more power. And I don't think they need Trump anymore. I think that the Republicans at this point, if it's going to come down to taking the election to the Supreme Court and having the House decide the president and kind of throw away the results of the election and the Electoral College and all that stuff, I feel like the Republican establishment and the party will just abandon Trump and they will join forces with the Democrats and like pressure Trump to just concede. So I feel like they've kind of got what they wanted from him. They don't need him anymore. And they're just going to take their gains, cut their losses, and not try to challenge the democracy and the election and make the United States look like a laughing stock that their president is claiming that it was a big fraudulent thing. And that's what I think is going to happen. But a lot of people seem to think that it's going to go into like civil war and all this crazy stuff and that there will be fraud found. And even if they find some fraud, I think that the Republicans and the establishment are probably just going to like get tired and sick of this and just turn on Trump.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, possible.
What do you think the other possibility is? Just Bitcoin goes up?
No. Bitcoin SV, bro. It's the only true Bitcoin out there. I'm stacking my Bitcoin SV. Bitcoin goes up, sure. Bitcoin will go up, then down, then back up, then down, then back up.
That's funny.
Well, have some Bitcoin, chill back, relax. Make sure you have access to good food. Make sure you have access to good food. Have a relationship with local farmers. Try to become more self-sufficient. I've been saying 5 years from now, leave the city. If you're living in the city, especially now with remote work becoming more status quo, and if you are in a job that's pretty much requires you to just sit at the desk and be on the computer, I'm telling you, most businesses will go to 50% capacity into the office, and they're going to have only once a week coming in for meetings because they also realize, hey, if we can pull this off, it's much cheaper for overhead as well for running our operations. So why would you live in a metropolitan city paying ridiculous mortgage or rent when you can move 2-3 hours away from the city and cut your costs in half? And then there's farmers around there. Get clean food, because the first thing that matters when it comes to personal security is having accessibility to the food. That's the number one thing that matters. Second thing that matters is obviously self-defense, whatever that means to you. And then, as always, whenever you can, if you have the financial means, hopefully you do, whether it's a $5, $20, or $20,000, slowly stack your Bitcoin.
So that brings us to this guy's question here. Stealth 206 says, have I missed Bitcoin? What do you think?
No. I think in an up run like that, I wouldn't buy anything. I would wait till it cools down a little bit. I wouldn't buy during a micro bull run we're in right now. I'd wait till it retraces a little bit. But in the grand scheme of things, the price of Bitcoin, I think we're still early. As you mentioned before, Brad, I think in my mind, 100K is sooner than later. It could be 2 years, it could be 3 years. So I want to say price prediction, but that's my target. I think 100K at least. And it's beyond the money aspect. So even if it goes to 50K, for example, let's say we stabilize at 50 for the next 10 years. That's it. It's a 50K. The very fact that it's portable, divisible, censorship resistant, that I can travel with it, that I can go peer to peer with Brad, that there's no intermediaries, the fact that we control the very means of the network, that in itself is a fucking value prop for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Stealth saying market correction sooner or later. What do you think? You want to dive on that one too?
A lot of variables, man. Historically, Christmas is always a good time in crypto. And then obviously tax season next year is always a bad time because people sell off, whether you have profit or loss. So I would just wait for, if you're planning to buy, just look at the market and wait till it retraces a little bit. Or you can do the other way. You can do buying averages. So not necessarily buy one time. Depending on the amount that you want to buy, you can slowly buy bit by bit, and you average in on the price that you bought in.
That's the way I recommend people, man. And I'm putting up this link here so Stealth and whoever's watching or listening can check this out, mayormultiple.info. That the Mayor multiple is just a 200-day moving average price of Bitcoin. So you take the price average over the last 200 days divided by what it is now, and you get a number, 1 or above or below 1. Historically, when the Mayor multiple is above 1, that means it's not statistically a good time to buy. When it's below 1, it's like always a buy.
Yep.
So like Trace Mayer came up with this concept. It's an equation and evaluation metric from the gold industry. That's how some people just had a fundamental indicator or whatever on whether or not they should buy or sell gold. It's this 200-day moving average, and it works really well for Bitcoin. So I think the thing actually is Preston Pish came up with this from the Investors Podcast and coined the term Mayor multiple. But I think it's like when it's above 1.25, that's when you shouldn't buy. And when it's below 1.8, it's like mortgage your house, go all in type of zone. But in general, the strategy is, and I'm like you, I think it's going to be 100K in the next couple, maybe 2 to 3 years. I think it's going to go to $1 million by 10 years. So I think it's going to go way up, especially as establishment politicians keep just printing money like crazy. Like we're probably in 10 years, we're probably gonna have at least $100 trillion debt. It's going to be nuts. And we may have moved on to modern monetary theory by then, like socialism may have fully taken over. Taxes might be super high. You don't know what's going to happen within 10 years, but you know that the value of the dollar is going to keep going down. And that means scarce assets like Bitcoin and art and real estate and I guess Yeezys. Some stuff is going up in value continuously because they're scarce. Now, something like Yeezys, I think, is more like a bubble. I wouldn't be investing in that, although we got some friends that are making some bank investing in sneakers and gun skins on games and stuff. But really, I would say cost average in, set a target. So Stealth saying, what do you think is a good price to buy? I think any price is a good price to buy Bitcoin, as long as you set yourself a target. If you have, say, 10 grand in the bank, then just say like, okay, or even your net worth is like 10 grand. Say, I want 5% of my net worth. Pick your percentage. Like learn about Bitcoin, get comfortable with it, know why Bitcoin is important and why it's likely to go up and how it's going to hold value, and slowly buy every month. Just if you're in the United States, Cash App is a good way to buy every month. You can dollar cost average in. If you're in Canada, what do you think? Bull Bitcoin? What's a good place to buy Bitcoin every month in Canada?
BitBuy is an exchange. They're great service. They do OTC as well. Yeah. Right. If you're in Quebec, they have ShakePay in Quebec.
Also, and if you're in Canada, we've got the QBTC.
Oh yeah, the QBTC when it comes to, but that you don't own your Bitcoin. But
you don't own your Bitcoin, but you can get price exposure. So if you're like,
and tax free if you use a TSFA.
Yeah, that's why it's good, because you can. I don't like recommending people keep their coins on exchanges or anything. So I kind of have a bit of a like conflict internally to recommend QBTC, but like the tax benefits of getting like tax-free appreciation of the price of Bitcoin is.
But if you never sell your Bitcoin, there is no tax.
That is also true. We can wait for the circular economy and the Bitcoin economy to
Correct.
happen.
And you can use services like Ledin, where if Bitcoin's going to increase in value in Canada, you can use that as collateral as a loan, which is not taxable, and then you pay back your loan.
So this guy's saying in England he uses Coinbase. I don't recommend people use Coinbase. Coinbase is kind of like not really a Bitcoin company. They're a crypto company, and they like have a bad track record for working with like surveillance companies that have had human rights violations in the past, like tracking down journalists and stuff. They acquired this company that was working with, I think it was the Saudis, to track down dissidents and stuff like that, and they hired them to do chain analysis on Bitcoin. So I don't recommend Coinbase. I don't philosophically align with those guys, but yeah. Oh, someone's there. Who wants to join? Someone wants to join us?
I gotta wrap it up, bro.
Yeah,
6:30.
wrap it up, man. It's been a good chat. Thanks for coming on and discussing the election. I guess TLDR. Don't panic. Personal responsibility.
Stack your Bitcoin. Get some good supply of food. Share more time with friends and family. Break more bread, and enjoy being a human.
Yeah, take time out of social media and be good to each other.
Amen to that, bro.
All right, man. Thanks a lot. Appreciate always chatting with you.
Yeah, man. Peace out.
If this goes on the podcast, what do you want people to look you up at? Where do you want them to find you?
Twitter, YouTube. My name, Ameer Rosic.
Ameer Rosic.
Bada bing. That's right.
All right. See you later, Ameer.
All right, brother. Cheers.